Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the studio. Oh, I just noticed my cup is like invisible because it's green. What are you going to do, right? You got your coffee? You ready to do this? Should we talk about what the kids are learning today? All right. I got all my notes because we are at the point, you guys, where we have so many classes. I have to make myself notes so that I get everything straight and I don't forget any props. Ready? Okie dokie, it is week 3 of September, and we got some good stuff to talk about, starting with our preschool classes. So this week they will be reading It Fell from the Sky by the Fan Brothers. It's a gorgeous book. I love the illustrations. It's got these great black and white bug illustrations. I'm gonna dive into this world of a bug community about they find a marble and they wonder where it came from and what it actually is. And so it's a fascinating book. It's beautifully illustrated. We're going to do some marble art at the beginning of class where we actually roll marbles in paint and do some painting with that very process, which I love for an arrival activity. And then remember our stamping art that we made last week where we had all the circles and they printed with paint and we kept them. Because this week we're going to add to those pictures using chalk pastels and they'll get to color them in and maybe make them look like marbles or bubbles or anything. And that's just fine. And that incorporates some of our multimedia curriculum in with our fundamentals. It also gives them the first opportunity to realize that, hey, that art that I used last week, maybe I could continue to revisit it week after week after week. Like just because I left it for a little while doesn't mean it's done. And that's I think a really cool concept for our preschool artists to remember that they did this last week and now we're going to change it, we're going to alter it, we're going to add to it. So that's what's coming up in preschool classes. Also in my notes, I want to make sure I mention, so Thursday, well, okay, let's go in order. Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, kids. If you're in one of those classes, this is your last week of September. We are done after this week. We will not see you again until October. Next week for my Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday people, next week is an off week. Monday people, we still need to see you one more time because Labor Day messed up your schedule. So you still come next week so you can get your third class in. Everybody else has the week off and we'll see you in October. Sound good? We'll send email reminders after your class. So we'll wait until your class happens. And then sometime before the next class, we'll send an email reminder that says, hey, heads up, no class next week. See you in October. Sound good? All right, let's talk about multimedia classes. I got props to show you. I'm going to set this book down so I don't get chalk pastel on it. So my K through thirds, if you remember, they are doing that Paul Klee inspired the Castle in the Sun picture, these architectural landscape drawings using rulers and chalk pastels. They're very large. And I wanted to show you a couple of them that are, oh, I picked one with lots of green. Of course I did. A couple of them are kind of coming along. You can see how big they are. This is a lot of space for these kids to color in, a lot. But they've done a really good job of keeping the pastels within the borders, which is hard. It's a little bit easier on this paper because it is so gritty and textured. So it doesn't smear as easily, but it's really beautiful colors, very rich. They've done a beautiful job of making sure they get coverage, which I think is hard. This one again has a lot of green, but let's just look at the pink part. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? That'll look beautiful when it's done. This is a beautiful green. Here's one that doesn't have a lot of green on it. And I just grabbed a couple. There's a whole bunch. But I loved this one because they've started adding the second layer. They've started adding textures and patterns on top of the colors they've already made. So imagine this whole thing covered in color. It'll be a beautiful work of art. They've got a lot of surface area to cover, which is just time. So we've got 2 class periods to do it. Believe it or not, some of our kids will finish this week in class. If they're focused, a lot of them will finish or at least have everything covered. And then the 4th week, because this is the 3rd week, the 4th week, we'll work on adding some more of those textures. We'll work on cleaning up some of our lines. Again, this might be the first time they've heard a teacher say, oh, you're done, because they'll go, I'm done because it's covered. Just because it's covered doesn't mean it's done. So then we'll have a critique, we'll have an assessment, we'll talk about like, what else could you do? What could make it better? Just because like the goal of the class isn't just to be done. The goal of the class is to make something that you're proud of, and that you like really put a lot of thought into it. And some of them really are done, and we never make kids go further than that. But we do want to push them and stretch them a little bit to do more. And so some of them will get it, some of them won't, some of them will be done, and that's okay. We got a plan for that. We've got other things that they can work on. They can work in their journals. They can make another smaller chalk pastel picture. In the 4th week, we also do our finishing on our artwork, which in the first month will take, with this group especially, a lot of time. This is where they name their art, they sign their art, they fill out their artist statement and their little gallery tag that goes with it. And so, reading and writing is tricky for this age group. They're still learning even that process. So that'll take a lot of our 4th class period, especially in this first month. We'll talk more about that next week. I'll show you what those look like. All right, our 4th and 5th grade and our homeschool, not much has changed since last week. Remember, in the first week, they did the portrait lesson, and then they drew with their glue. They practiced drawing with glue in their journals, and then they drew on their portraits. In the 2nd class period, they worked on getting familiar with the medium itself and learning about chalk pastels. And then this week they'll start adding color. So I did bring the examples, but they haven't changed much from last week, because this is what they looked like on the first week too. But they're going to start filling these in, and then this is a much smaller scale-wise picture than what our K1s are working on and our 2nd, 3rds. So a lot of them will get a base coat of color on this entire paper in this week's class. So when we see these next week, they'll be completely covered in color. But then in the 4th week, it'll be adding in those details that we couldn't draw with glue. It'll be adding in maybe a deeper value or a lighter value on top, and doing some of those kind of blends or ombres or gradients, depending on whatever the kids want to call it these days. But we'll go ahead and add those in. We'll add textures, we'll add patterns, just to build some depth into our picture in that 4th week. Cool. These ones here get finished in a mat board on the 4th week. So they'll actually be finished in mats. The big ones don't, because they're huge, but these ones will be finished in mats. Make sure, I should check my notes. I think that's it. Yep. All right, here we go. Our big kids. So I brought some examples, and I'm trying to be really careful with these. The 6th, 7th, 8th through 12th are doing the bird's eye view of the koi ponds. And so if you'll remember, we talked about how in their first week, they really had to spend a lot of time coming up with their composition. So they did research. The first step was like, what does a koi fish look like? What does it look like from above? What other, like, what can it shape itself into? It can do straight, it can go curved, it can be stylized. And they did a lot of drawing in their journals. They did some brainstorming on how they wanted to do their composition. If they were going to do, just one fish in the middle, if they were going to do multiple fish, if the fish were going to be, in kind of a circular composition, if they were going to be an angular composition, was it going to be dark in the background? Was it going to have rocks in the background? Was it going to have lily pads in the background? Was it going to be really, really light and blue in the background? So they had to make all of those decisions and choices as artists. We did that the first week. The 2nd week, which was last week, they did all their drawing. So they got out their black paper. They're using a black multimedia paper, and they started drawing that out, and then they started blocking it in. So I wanted to show you some of theirs. Again, anything green isn't going to show up, but look how bright and vibrant that blue is. You guys, that is not easy to do, to get it that bright on black paper. That's a lot of layers and a lot of work for our chalk pastels. Again, I'll be really careful with these because I don't want to smudge them. They've got papers like in between their artwork. You can see all the green lily pads, right? So right now these are kind of flat, where because this was our week of blocking in. They just got that one color in. So you're not going to see the highlights or the shadows in there. You're just going to see kind of the number one color. Here's one that cover up the name. I don't want anyone to be upset that I'm showing their artwork, but when it's not finished, some art, we're weird like that. Sometimes we don't like to see other people to see our art when it's not finished. But we've got this one sketched in, and then we haven't gotten around to blocking it. Everybody works at a different pace, especially as kids get older. It's just, we're all different. So, I love this one. These fish are so flowy. Look how stylized those are. So we've got some really great things happening in these. Oh, this is a great example because remember I said like, oh, that blue is so bright and so vibrant. This is what it looks like when you just put the first layer on. It's a little bit blue, but can you see how much more sheer and see-through this is? Like we can still see the black through it. That's because it's only one layer. It's not bad. It's not like, oh, this one, the other one was good and this one is bad. That's not it. This one is just at an earlier stage in the drawing. And I think it's a really great example. So sound good? All right, so I'll stop. Hang on, one more. This is the first time I've looked through them. I didn't look through them. I just grabbed them out of the cubby. Look at those. All right. So we got a lot of really great things happening in our classes. This is actually a 6th, 7th grade class that I'm showing you here. Again, nothing against my 8th through 12s. Nothing against my 8th through 12s. It's just the cubby I grabbed things from. So, and I try not to grab from too many cubbies because then I don't get things back where they're supposed to go. These guys here are going to continue on the journey. They're going to keep adding more layers. They're going to keep adding more vibrancy. They're going to keep adding more depth. They're going to add highlights and shadows and details until everything is covered. That's why we can call it a painting instead of a drawing. Everything is covered. We'll apply a fixative to it to keep them from smearing. And then those will get framed in the 4th week as well with a pre-cut mat. They will do their artist statement. They will sign theirs. They will name their art, all that stuff. And most of our middle schoolers and high schoolers have done that process before. So they will be fast with it. If you do have, I'm going to talk about this a little bit with my 103s, but I'll mention it with this group too. If you have somebody in this class who is a slower worker, they didn't maybe hit the benchmark last week, which was to get the base coat over the whole thing. The instructors will talk to that student about coming in for additional studio time if they would like to. We have those times built into our schedule. In Liberty, it's Wednesdays. In Flatwoods, it's Fridays. But honestly, like we're really flexible, especially with this group. So like some of our 8th through 12s could come in early and sit in the 6th through 7th class to get an additional work time. Like we're good with that. We just have to know about it ahead of time so that we can be ready and prepared and staffed and have your stuff out and all that stuff. It's my personality type. I'm just a planner. So we'll talk to the kiddos that maybe need more time. Not a bad thing at all. It's just everybody works at a different pace. And we want to make sure we give you the studio time to make your art. So we'll talk to them, and then you guys, you can always reach me via email or Facebook Messenger to set that stuff up. All right, drawing 101. I'm going to switch gears here. I gotta make sure my hands are fairly clean from chalk pastels before I go touching all the drawing journals. All right, so drawing 101 last week, they did a study of eyeballs. Remember our arrival activity for them was a contour drawing. So something that they would draw the outline and the details of an object without picking up their pencil. We will eventually work to doing blind contour, but this one was just a contour drawing, which is an exercise in like attaching the eye to your hand. It's a fun exercise. They a lot of them really enjoyed that exercise, and we'll probably do it more for warm-ups or like as a like some of them liked it so much we used it as an incentive to stay focused on some of our art. Like if you do this, we'll do another session of contour drawing, which is really fun to see. After that, they did some eye studies. So we had small pictures. There's a I know they were on Instagram stories, but I think there's also one on Facebook. If not, it's scheduled to go out this week, of the different like little eyes that we printed, just close up black and whites of different eyes, because everyone's eye looks different. And even my eye can look different depending on my mood or depending on like what my facial expression is doing, or even on, the angle of my face. And so we printed a whole bunch of different versions, and then they used their power of observation to draw them in their journals. The great thing about this was because it was a black and white drawing, it gave us a chance to introduce values. So we had a lot of different pencils. Those of you who don't know, there are different drawing pencils, graphite pencils. Well, there's different charcoal pencils too, but we were using graphite, and they are on a scale, the hardest being on the H side of the scale, and the numbers get higher the harder the pencil is. The softer pencils are on the B side of the scale. And then the softer the pencil, the higher number on B. So something right in the middle is like an HB. And then there's a 2H and a 4H and a 6H and so on. And then there's a 2B and a 4B. And so it's a spectrum. And so we use some different pencils. My favorite pencil is it's B, and that's what I use almost in all of my drawings. It's a really soft graphite pencil, and I love it. This person here, I can tell when she was drawing, it's an H. I can tell by the mark, and I can tell by the value, how light or dark it is. So they got to explore those pencils, and a lot of them also did a value scale. We were trying to get them just to see it and to play with different values. Here's another great example. And you can see like this person here, their mark is a lot heavier. They also have different values in the picture. So there are grays, there are darks, there are lights, where this one here, mostly one value. This one here, mostly line. So we have artists who are at different stages of sometimes it's an awareness, and sometimes it's just not what I want to draw, and that's fine too. But we want to introduce the concepts, and so that gave them an opportunity to do it. I believe most of them also did a value scale, which for some of our artists there's a value scale. Some of our artists, that's the first time they've seen that, and they will do that here in the studio. They will do that forever and ever and ever. That's the first thing that my 103 classes did, was a value scale, and they rolled their eyes at us. Like, we've done this every year. We're like, yes, multiple times. I know you have, but it's good review. So this was the first step in our 101s, the first time that for a lot of them, we got to introduce that concept. They will see that a lot. We will reference it a lot. We will continue to teach it. It's not one of those things that you just like, you get it introduced and a light bulb goes on and now I've got it. It's practice over and over and over again of how to render values accurately. All right, my 102 comic. Oh, I didn't say what they were doing this week. Sorry, I got so distracted. 101, first one more. 101 people this week, we're going to introduce a brand new media to them. They're going to get to use Sumi ink. So parents of 101 students, please know Sumi ink is not a washable medium. It will stain your clothes. It is super black and super permanent. So make sure that you wear art clothes to the studio. They're going to be doing, for their arrival activity, just to warm up, they'll get to do some collaborative Sumi ink drawing, just to play and get used to it. We're going to be using it with nibs instead of brushes. So they're going to actually use straws that have been cut into a nib instead of a brush. So it's not a painting, it's a drawing medium, and it is super saturated and dark. So they're going to draw with nibs this week and Sumi ink. We're going to do portraiture, which we've done, right? We did self-portraiture the first week. But when the first week we did it from observation, meaning we had a mirror and we put them in front of it. We said, draw yourself, look at yourself, draw yourself. This week, we're going to draw from our imagination. So rather than putting a mirror in front of them and having them draw themselves, we're going to say, draw a person. What does a person look like? Any person, anybody. And so they'll draw from what's in their brain and from imagination, which is a totally different muscle. So they will draw people from their imagination using those nibs. It'll give us a chance to talk about mark making and the marks that we use. And then we'll also get a chance to do some value review, because once that Sumi ink dries, we're going to use charcoal to create grayscale, right? Because the charcoal will not be as dark as the Sumi ink. We're going to use willow or vine charcoal, which is more silvery and gray than the compressed charcoal. And then that will give us grayscale in our pictures. I'm excited to see what that comes up from that. All right, now we can move on. Comic and cartoon. So drawing 102, comic and cartoon. Remember, this is the class. All the 102s are the ones that work in their journals, and everything is an exercise. Everything is a lesson and a chance for them to work through it. It's all about growth. It's not about the product that they make at the end. So this is our benchmark month. They will repeat these lessons in April so that we can see what kind of growth happens. And they got to draw from drawing mannequins, which are a lot of our 102s. This is not the first time that they've done this. And they get to put the mannequins in an action pose and then draw that pose. Now, here are a couple examples, and then I'm going to talk about it. Now, the reason that The reason that we use a drawing mannequin is because sometimes imagining the figure is hard. Imagining a figure like standing is really easy. We've drawn that enough, but doing something is very difficult. So being able to put the mannequin in that pose gives us something to reference. And that's kind of like the framework for our character, right? So you draw the marshmallow man. Hang on. Right? You draw a marshmallow man, and then he becomes a person. Now, one of the things that we see at the beginning of the year that we hope to see by the end of the year, right? Because it's all about growth, is that all of our characters at the beginning of the year are straight on. So that means that the viewer is standing basically on street level with our character. But what we'd like to push our artists to do is to move the POV of the viewer. Not because you always have to do that, but because it makes an interesting composition. So we are going to work with them on moving the viewer's eyes down or up. And we'll do that by moving the mannequin. The other thing we're going to try later on in the year is we have, I should have brought them, but we have some mannequins that are specifically made for comic and cartoon. They're very expensive. You know, the ones we have here are the wooden ones are, you know, $8 or something a piece. The ones that are made for comic and cartoons are over 100. And they have like detachable hands, and the hands can hold objects, and they move at more joints, like they'll flex at the toe joint. You can really get them into positions. And the cool thing about that is, especially in an action pose, it leaves less up to the imagination for them. So we'd like to get those out later in the year, so the kids can do this lesson again. And I talked to Miss Grace about using photography along with the lesson, because especially in our comic and cartoons, the skill of taking a three-dimensional object and flattening it into 2D objects is one that they don't practice as much as our realistics. And so using photography, it flattens the image for them. So let's say, for instance, Miss Allison is a comic book character, and I'm going to draw a picture of this. Let's do that. Now, my hand is coming straight at you, which creates foreshortening. Drawing this is really tricky. If you were sitting in front of me and I did this and I said, draw that, this is really hard right here. It's easier if you draw me from video, or you draw me from a still shot of this video, because it is already flattened for you. But if you're sitting in front of me, that's a hard thing to do, because you move a little bit and the whole thing changes. And your eyes don't flatten that. They see it as my arm, and then they try to draw my arm. So we're gonna use some photography later with those really fancy mannequins and do this lesson again, to hopefully push them a little bit further with these characters. And we're gonna work that in. It wasn't in the plan, but we're gonna work it in, because I think that after talking to Grace about this lesson, I think they're ready for it, and I think it'll be really, really good for them. So we did our characters in motion last week. This week for our comic, we're going to go with, this is 102. Remember, 103 is already doing a self-portrait. 102 is going to do a self-portrait lesson. They will draw themselves in their style. So if they're comic style, they'll draw comic. If they're anime, manga, cartooning, they'll draw that style. Some of them might play with more than one style, but the goal is to identify that style and draw themselves in that. So we'll see some good stuff from them on the self-portraits. All right, let's put this. Next slide. Drawing 103, or no, drawing 102. Advanced realistic. They are doing their benchmarks as well. And so the last week was a fruit still life, and they got to use a drawing media in chalk pastels, and it was amazing. You see a pear and a lemon and an apple there. So we had a lot of really great chalk pastel drawings. The kids very much enjoyed working with the pastels and creating values, creating textures, blending colors. So it was a great lesson. It was also a chance for us to do a lesson in like perspective and scale and things. And they nailed that, which is exactly what we want to see in a 102 class, because we expect that they at least have some understanding of putting things in space and relative scale and all that stuff. So a lot of great things from that class. We were really excited for them. That is not the last time they will see chalk pastels. All right, this week in our advanced realistic class, they are also doing self-portraits. So drawing a self-portrait is something you will do for your entire life as an artist. I have hundreds of self-portraits because, it's a subject that's always with me. And so we'll draw a self-portrait as accurately as we can. So different than our comic and cartoon, where they look at themselves and then have to make decisions about how do I represent me in this style. Our realistic don't. They look at and they say, what do I look like today, right now, in this moment, in this mirror? What do I look like? And that's what they'll be doing. Okay? They're going to use, we'll let them use any media they want, but we'll start in pencil and then go from there. All right, 103, I didn't bring any projects with me. They look really good. But I do know my 103 students, and some of them may not like them to be shown on video when they're not finished. I was like, I will wait. So my 103 project's really good. We've got the realistic one is doing that fractured self-portrait. And a lot of them have a couple windows already done. There are some that spent the entire class period on one window. And that's not a bad thing. Because again, we all work at different speeds and we all work like at our own pace. As long as we are only as long as the reason we only have one window is because that is seriously the pace we work on and not because we spent the whole class period talking. We're okay with that. So if they need more time, the instructor will talk to them about how to get that scheduled so that they can come in and spend more time in the studio. We really don't want at the end of the month to be like, here, take your project home. It's not done. Hope you finish it at your house, because we know it's not going to happen. We'd rather them come in here and get the time dedicated to getting it done. Now, if they're like, I don't care if I finish it, I'm good. We're not going to make them. There's no grade, but we do want to offer the studio time for them to finish their project. If their speed is just a little bit slower than everybody's. All right. Our comic drawers for 103 have that split portrait. So we're looking for two different things on either side of their self-portrait. It could be two different drawing styles. It could be two different moods. It could be two different color, black and white, whatever they want to do. A lot of great design choices happening there. And their composition looks really good, which is great. So we're excited to see what comes out of that. Most of them are done with the pencil drawing. This week, they will start their inking. So they'll actually go through, remember we did that mini lesson in line weight. So they'll start doing that. And then and they will decide if they're going to do color. We've got options for color. For this 103 class, they will always have options. So we've got pencils, like color pencils, Prismacolors. We have alcohol ink markers. And we also have acrylic inks if somebody prefers to paint. Because it's like watercolor. All right. Creative Explorations class. Where are my notes on creative exploration? So our September curriculum for creative explorations wraps up this week. So if you're in the Wednesday class at Platt or the Friday class here in Liberty, this is your last week of classes for this month. This is a 3-week class, unlike the multimedias, which are 4 weeks. This is 3 weeks. So this is your last week of classes for the month of September. Next week will be an off week. We will wrap September this week. We'll get ready for October. We'll be ready for you starting in October. The curriculum for October is very focused on clay and 3D and sculpture. So the art history I know is like the history of clay and learning about how, the history of clay. And then even the journal activity works with designs that go on like pottery and vessels and things. So it should be a really great lesson for them. Even in our still life, our still life table is a modeling clay still life. So I think it'll be a good one. If you have questions about creative explorations, let us know. I know it's a new class for us, and some of you may have come from multimedias and you're like, what is this? So if you have questions about what's going on in there, let me know. Again, this is our process-based class. And so it is all about what the kids want to explore as a lesson. So there are stations set up and they go between them. We know we've only had 2 classes under our belt. We know as just from working with, I was going to say kids, but I think it's just people. From working with people, the first inclination for people is to visit all of them and make sure we've checked them all off the list. We hope as time goes on that rather than going broad and doing all of them, that they go deep, that they find a station and stay there, that they find something that really interests them and they go deep with it. But we also know that's just going to take time. So the instructors are there to facilitate, and that's kind of the culture we're working on in our creative explorations class. Housekeeping, you ready? If you are joining us for Halloween, please make sure you get signed up. Those classes are coming up at the end of October. Registration opened last week, I think. Or no, 2 weeks ago, because it opened on the 1st. So I want to make sure that we have a spot for you. They are going. I think we're half full on all the classes. So just a reminder to get signed up if you're planning on joining us. There's a evening class on Friday night that is for the big kids on like K and up. And then there's a Saturday morning class that's for the littles. What else? I think I'm sending a marketing email on that this week. So I anticipate that they will all fill up this week. So that email might go out tomorrow. Just a heads up. All right. The next thing, click. If you are signed up, so there were 2 different ways you could pay your tuition, right? You could pay it all at once. And that's like our studio club enrollment or our semester enrollment. Or you could go monthly and you pay your tuition monthly. If you are paying monthly, and you do not plan to join us for October, you need to let us know, okay? Our monthly students are like re-enrolled automatically in the next month class because, you know, we don't want to make you enroll every month. We've been in business for 9 years. Trust me, if there was a way to do it, we have tried it all. But the problem with not doing auto enrollment is if you don't remember to re-enroll for the next month, then somebody else sneaks in and takes your spot and like a new kid. And we don't want that. So you are re-enrolled automatically. We have saved that spot for you. Your name is on it. We plan on you being here. If that is not the case, we need to know. The deadline that we ask for is the 20th, which is coming up this coming Wednesday. I put deadline in quotes because I don't really ever enforce that. Because I'm too nice. And I know things come up. And life is busy. So that's one deadline that's pretty soft. But I do ask that you let us know as soon as you know, because we do have wait lists for classes and I like to fill them with people from the wait list if we can. And my wait list is people prefer some notice as well. It also helps us with ordering supplies. Okay. The other thing is enrollment changes and adjustments. It's the beginning of the school year and, you know, things change. So if you signed your kid up for a Drawing 102 class and they're coming home and they're either, you know, that they were anticipating more of a project focused class, or they really wanted to explore paint and all we're doing is drawing. Maybe it was somebody who signed up for a realistic class and it turns out they really thought that they were going to be drawing comic style, but maybe they just didn't know how to voice that. If there's this change that needs to be made, we'd like to do that this week. Again, because in finagling and moving, it will open up a spot. And then I might have somebody else that wants to jump in and take your spot. So most changes can be made. There's a few exceptions because we have a few classes at capacity. But if there's somebody that needs to switch, like I would love to know this week so that I can make those changes. The best way to reach me for that is going to be with an email. You can, you know, Allison@orangeeaselart.com or a Facebook message. I do love it. If it is something that is like longer in explanation than just an email, send me a short email, explain the situation very briefly, and we'll set up a phone call. Okay, and then we'll talk through it because I know sometimes it's maybe not an easy fix and you just need to talk to somebody, so I can help with that. All right, I think that's it for me. That's all my notes. If anybody needs anything this week, I am available to you. I'm looking forward to a great 3rd week of classes and then wrapping up September and getting into October. Oh my gosh, you guys, school year is going to be like over before we know it. So have a wonderful rest of your week and I will chat with you guys soon.